Hello,
Good
everyone.
evening, and
God
welcome to
damn it,
You
we did it
Talk,
again.
where Kyle is picking up my habits. Go on, you sing Britney Spears this time.
Um, sorry. When you said that, the first thing that came to mind was Barbie Girl, but then I was like, wait a minute, that's not right. That's not Britney Spears. And then
It's because of that Barbie movie. Everyone's going insane.
what Barbie?
So
Wait. I haven't seen this and I haven't heard. You know what? Do I want to hear about it? I don't
there's
think
a
I do.
new Barbie movie, and it's producing memes, despite the fact that it's not due out for another 3 months.
You know what? I'll look at the memes. I won't look at the movie
That's
because
fair
I am a
and
meme
valid.
lord. I am a meme lord and I am a scrub lord. But
Good
today,
evening, everyone. Welcome to You Talk, where Kyle is a meme lord and a scrub lord by his own admission. And today we are going to be asking, well, I guess, expounding on foreign trade and why perhaps we don't give it as much consideration as we ought to, and how important it is to our future as a nation.
yes, this is a really sort of it's a big one because international trade is both the gift that keeps on giving for Australia, but also the gift that we take for granted and that half of us don't even know we have. It is international trade is what built modern Australia. If starting with Gulf Whitlam's trade reforms and actually approaching China and other Southeast Asian nations to trade, if he didn't start that, and then if Keating didn't continue that and expand largely upon that, and if we didn't sort of open up to the international community and engage with them on trade, Australia would look very different. According to Kevin Rudd, we would be an IMF bailout case today. And by the going off the data and projected outcomes, I am inclined to agree with that statement.
The data and the projected outcomes for a future that never came to pass, that is. It is important to note that
Yes.
these are
True.
built off mathematical models, and mathematical models cannot adequately capture some of the bizarre things that just happen sometimes.
True.
We have a statistician,
It's basically a best guess
Nasir
situation.
Nasir Taleb, I think his name is Nassim Taleb, who discusses the black swan effect, or the
Black Swan effect.
the effect of highly improbable things nonetheless just happening.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
and
that's
it's
that's
it's
fair.
worth noting that we may have ended up hitching our wagon to Europe or to the United Kingdom, or maybe we could have worked with Central Africa. Like, there's a lot that could have
That
happened.
would
There's a
be an
lot that could have just
interesting what if. That would
randomly
be an
occurred.
interest. You know what? That's a future episode. Because what
Mm-hmm.
if Australia engaged heavily in trade ties with Africa, particularly sub-Saharan and East Africa? I think that would be a very interesting what if scenario.
Your audio's clipping slightly.
Is it?
Boop,
What's
boop, boop. Yep,
okay?
that's
Well, this
better.
this this. I mean, look, it's recording on my computer, so hopefully it doesn't get picked up. But I think that'd be a very interesting scenario. But nonetheless, we need to talk about
The
this.
trade that we do have.
Yes, this realities trade, not the alternate history.
Yes.
Damn it! I just want to talk about the alternate history now. I'm a bit of an alternate history buff. What if scenarios are incredibly entertaining for me. Um, but I shall refrain. I will
You'd best
with all of
refrain.
my mortal strength, I shall refrain and instead simply talk about international trade in Australia.
Okay,
Because I,
yeah.
I think that I think that international trade could actually be expanded in Australia. Because right now we export mostly raw materials and food produce. And we also do some services stuff, but that's kind of an even trade or perhaps even a lopsided trade against Australia. For those of you who have gotten a call from, Malaysia or India, for a service, for an internet service of some kind. or some other, telemarketing service. You would very well know. So, let's talk about why. I mean, we've already established, I guess, that modern Australia was built in large part by international trade. Let's talk about how.
Okay, so for
So we
that,
wouldn't.
I've just pulled up all the information on the free trade agreements that we're in, because I
The
think
more
that's a
recent
huge
ones,
part
or
of
the ones
this.
during the more recent ones, or the ones during the Whitlam, Hawke, and Keating
All
years.
of them.
Well, let's talk, because I'd say it was built very, like, modern Australia was built off the ones, essentially everything pre Howard, built modern Australia. So let's talk about those first, and if we have time, perhaps we'll get into the other ones.
Okay, so there's actually relatively little pre-Howard in terms of like free trade agreements. Um, we have the ANZCERTA, which is between Australia and New Zealand, and that took effect at the start of 1983. And the next one after that was in 2003 between us and Singapore.
Yeah, but what about the trade agreement? I mean, not necessarily free trade, but the trade agreements, with us and much of Southeast Asia, because we've been trading with them since Whitlam was in government. We started trade with China, for example.
Okay, so
And
we have trade and investment data here. And here we go. Milestones in Australian trade.
go for it.
Perfect. And trade statistics. So
Everyone's
this is
favorite subject, statistics. It's all right. We swear we'll try and make it interesting.
okay. So
Jokes,
our diplomatic relations were established with China in 1972.
Okay.
And our trade with Japan really sort of kicked off in 1976. And in 1976, later in the year, we had the Nippon-Australia Relations Agreement, so NARA Treaty, signed with Japan.
Okay, yeah.
Which is the basic treaty of friendship and cooperation. Yeah, that's where we're at in terms of the sort of Whitlam years.
Yeah. So he kind of got the ball rolling. Like he got everything started, did the initial legwork.
Yeah, and in 78, China became our sixth largest trading partner. In 1978.
Yeah. Just within a couple of years of him establishing, I believe, diplomatic relations with China.
Mm-hmm. Yep, those diplomatic relations were established in 72.
Yeah, so within 6 years, they had become our sixth largest trading partner.
Yeah, I have a photograph here of Gough Whitlam with Chairman Mao Zedong.
Was it Mao Zedong or was it Deng Xiaoping?
Yeah. No.
Oh no, I'm thinking. Okay, I'm getting it mixed up. I'm not particularly well versed at Horst is making faces at me. I'm not particularly well versed with Chinese leaders. Okay, I know that
we need an overlay.
Exist.
We need an overlay video of an Encyclopedia Britannica just bonking you in the head.
Stop creating more work for me in post production.
Yeah, no,
I've already
got
enough the last couple of videos. Yeah. So Mao Zedong, and he will put that photo up, and so he established trade, or he established relations 72. Then in 1978, 6 years later, they became our sixth largest trading partner. And then was there a bit of a lull in it? Was that what you were saying?
Actually, let's have a look at the 1980s now, because what we have is Sparteca, whatever the heck that is, the South Pacific Regional Trade and Economic Cooperation Agreement.
Interesting. I'd like to read more about that.
Aims to increase exports from South Pacific Forum Islands to Australia and New Zealand.
Wait, is the South? I'm getting a vague memory. I might be entirely wrong here, but a vague memory that the South Pacific Islands Forum ended up becoming the Pacific Islands Forum.
I believe so.
Yes, we're kind of a major player in that, actually. We're one of the leading nations in that.
I mentioned earlier the free trade agreement between Australia and New Zealand, and that's the next thing to sort of happen in terms of our trading partnerships, is the point at which we've decided that the Australia-New Zealand Closer Economic Relations Trade Agreement, the ANCERTA, was signed December 82.
Hmm.
Uh,
That would have
and
been during Malcolm Fraser's time as Prime Minister.
that is correct.
Yeah.
And it is still one of the world's most comprehensive and multilaterally compatible free trade agreements.
Hmm.
So back in the 80s,
does it
we
have a
got
wide
it done.
effect? Yeah. Does it have a wide effect on Australia? Because I don't know much about that one. In fact, this is the first I've heard of that one. So trade with New Zealand in that regard is a I guess a big
I mean,
deal
I'm
in
pretty
terms of the
sure
Australian economy and
I'm pretty
exports.
sure in terms of the Australian economy, that particular agreement is the reason why anytime a New Zealand musician gets successful, we decide to call them Australian. That agreement is why Australia owns Split Ends. I'm not actually sure of the wider effects of that, but I have to admit that our friends just a little hop over the river got the worst part of the deal on that one because we keep stealing
Yeah,
all their musicians.
yeah, and then I did wasn't Russell Crowe New Zealand until we stole him as well.
I think so. Yeah,
Yeah,
and now he lives like on the waterfront in bloody Sydney.
yeah. Sorry, New Zealand. I think we screwed you there. But see, that's the thing. We didn't really like. I didn't know that existed, and I think that kind of goes to show, just how much. Because it was estimated that everyone in Australia is, on average, $11,000 richer. Like we're $11,000 richer per capita, um, than we otherwise would be if we didn't open up trade with Asia. And
Hmm.
I mean, everyone kind of knows about, like they probably don't know the details very well, but they know that we trade with Asia a lot and that we do export a lot there.
Yeah, and it's
Everyone has at
in
least a vague
1989,
idea.
right? In 1989, we hosted the first meeting of the the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum. So, like from the start, really, we have staked ourselves as invested in the success of our neighboring countries.
Hmm.
And
Interesting.
that's, I think there is
Yeah.
more than just monetary value that we derive
Although
from foreign trade.
you say from the start, I don't think you're quite right there because technically the start of the nation was 1901, and before that, like until Whitlam started opening up trade ties with China.
Okay,
I mean, the most.
let's be
let me finish
clearer.
here. Let me finish. So before Whitlam started opening up trade ties with China and we started trading with our neighbors a lot more, the I'll like I think the only trade agreement I've even heard of was one with Scotland, from back in the day. And there was like we opened up a trade envoy thing in Scotland, and that was kind of the only thing I
Okay,
heard of
so we actually
before
had a
that.
commerce agreement with Japan in 57.
Oh, okay, we did. Interesting.
Yeah, and
Wait, wasn't
the
Japan
first
occupied in
pact.
57, or was that, or did they stop being
Yes,
occupied? Okay, so did I'm curious then. Did Japan um
we have a trade
sort of
treaty with Canada
negotiate that?
going back to 25.
Interesting. Oh,
I'm just
25. That's a while ago.
yeah, I'm having a quick look through the decades.
So, because
Um,
it almost seems like we only had before Whitlam became prime minister. It seems like we almost, not exclusively, but for the most part, we only had um trade agreements with Anglosphere nations.
no, we also had a trade agreement with Korea in 1965.
65.
Yeah,
That's kind of interesting because it's like, okay, because it's like, okay,
but what I'm sort of
Japan occupied by the US, we get a trade agreement. Korea, um, in part, I guess not occupied per se, but like there's a war fought there, with the US being part of it, and then we get a trade agreement with them. I don't know, an interesting thing I noticed.
For what it's worth, the primary thing that we were exporting to Japan in the 50s and 60s was wool.
Yeah, true.
But what I sort of was getting at with regards to from the beginning, I suppose that's not quite correct. I suppose what I mean to say is that Australia has historically gotten in on the ground floor with potential trading partners. We've been quick to recognize trading partners and recognize that they can bring value to us and we can bring value to them, and to try and agree on mutually beneficial terms.
And that has served us well. Again, per capita, like $11,000 richer.
It served us so well that the average Australian doesn't need to think about it. It just works. It's there in the background, forever churning, like Windows 10
like
threatening to update.
Yeah, and that's almost like a paradox. It's like the more we got the benefits from it, the less we remember that it's actually giving us benefit.
Yeah, because the diplomats and lawyers are actually really good at what they do. It's a lot of hard work hammering out agreements that are agreeable to all parties, and we're good at it.
And what's kind of funny is that I'm actually remembering a quote from Futurama, of all things, in the episode where Bender met God, and it ends because Bender was told, that it was what was the exact quote? It was the better you do. I'm probably just paraphrasing, but the better you do, the less people notice. Or it was oh no, if you do things right, people will wonder whether you did anything at all.
Are you sure that's Bender meeting God and not just you talking to an IT professional? Because like that's how it is in IT.
I mean, it could be both.
If you are doing all the work and all the systems are running well, people would be like, why the hell do we even need an IT guy? And the moment everything goes to heck, it's like, oh, why do we even use this IT guy?
Yeah. I mean, it very well is applicable, but I do remember that as the actual quote from Futurama. I don't know why I remember that quote and not more important things, but it did strike me in some way back then. That if you do things right, people will wonder whether you did anything at all. Which kind of actually, I think I now finally get why people don't realize how good like Kevin Rudd and Paul Keating were, and Bob Hawke and Golf Whitlam. Like, they kind of have a fan base, but most people that I speak to, at least with the later three of those, don't they wonder whether or not they did much at all, or they wonder, they don't quite recognize just how much good they did for Australia.
I mean, the other half of it is that as the leader, as the head of state, part of your job is to not make things worse.
True. And they very much did. Well, I'd argue that they
sometimes they didn't make things worse.
Well, I mean, look, they copped the blame for a lot, but I think that was unjustified. But that's a whole other issue. I mean, like how much I hate the whole Labor's debt bullshit. As debt even has no bearing on an economy. But anyway, I won't talk about that.
But the Liberals are the superior economic managers, Kyle.
Shut the fuck up.
Didn't you listen to all the advertisements?
Shut the fuck up. Even though you're joking, I could just feel it rising in me. But that being said, we've run out of time, so fortunately only Horse
you are
has to endure that after the
$11,000
episode.
a year. All of you, every single one of you is $11,000 a year richer because we have done trade with our neighbors so well that it hasn't turned into a grade A shit show. Every single one of you. It was done so elegantly that you didn't even know unless you were some sort of really weird nerd, you nerd.
Like us two. And with
it is the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah, with that,
good night.
I think we'll end it. Have a good one.